just sound?
What?
With just sound?
Mm-hmm. Maybe not even that, but it's not.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the board meeting. It looks like we actually have everyone from the Board of Trustees is here, and I'm apparently having this meeting on the face of the sun, according to that video. But welcome everyone to the Board of Trustees meeting. We've got everyone here. We've got a pretty good full room. So I would say at 7 o'clock on October 19th, 2021, we call to order this meeting of the Nederland Board of Trustees. Macy, would you please call the roll?
Of course. Mayor Larson.
Here.
Trustee Danforth.
Here.
Trustee Coombs Ismail.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Baumhover.
Here.
Trustee Corvalin.
Here.
Trustee Apt.
And Trustee Taylor is here as well.
Oh, I'm so sorry about that. Trustee Taylor.
All right, thank you, and welcome everyone for joining us this evening. We will move forward here into our consent agenda, of which we have 5 items. If any members of the board have questions or comments or a motion regarding the consent agenda.
Move adoption of the consent agenda.
I second.
We have a motion from Trustee Apt and a second from Trustee Taylor. Macy, if you call the vote on the consent agenda.
Yes. All right. So we have Mayor Larson.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baumhover.
Yes.
Trustee Danforth.
Yes.
Trustee Corvalin.
Yes.
Trustee Apt.
Yes.
Trustee Taylor.
Yes.
Trustee Coombs Ismail.
Yes.
I wasn't paying attention. Was that everyone?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, good. Well, then the consent agenda has passed unanimously. Thank you, Macy. Thank you, everyone. We'll move forward into public comment this evening. And before we go to public comment on non-agenda items, I just want to second the public comment that we have in the packet this evening from Dennis. And I want to just, with all my heart, thank Chris Curran for all she has done over 30 years of working for the betterment of this town. Those who haven't heard, she has announced she is retiring at the end of the year, and I don't envy anyone who tries to fill her shoes, but I just really wanted to take this chance to thank her for all she's done for this town and really appreciate the work she's done, with the food pantry and the clothing closet over the years. And thank you, Chris. I don't think you're on here, but I'll be thank you again in person multiple times when I see you. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Here, here.
As for anyone else who has joined us this evening, if you'd like to speak on any item that is not on our agenda this evening, now would be your opportunity. You can have up to 3 minutes if you catch our attention, and then speak and let us know what you're thinking about. So raise your hand, come on camera, and start waving your arms. Speak, or just start speaking, and you can have up to 3 minutes. I am not seeing or hearing anyone. So we will move forward into our action items this evening. beginning with a amendment to our rights of nature. Miranda, please introduce this.
My introduction is short and sweet, but good evening. Before you is the Rights of Nature resolution that has been amended. When the resolution was originally approved on July 6th, the Board of Trustees didn't revise that resolution that was presented. Upon passing, there was further reflection, and it was determined that some edits were needed that would better reflect the intent of the Board of Trustees. So before you is that revised resolution, and if passed, it would replace the resolution which was passed on July 6, 2021. And Mayor Larson, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to you to provide some initial comments on this.
Yes, thank you, Miranda. As Miranda said, this was something we discussed and brought before the board earlier this summer. And it reflects our town's deep commitment to nature and to the protection of our environment. But as we started looking at it and thinking about it in the larger context, we realized it didn't quite fit the needs and goals of the town entirely, or fit the intent that we thought we were passing. And so we've made a few slight modifications to it to better reflect the current state of the town, and more importantly, the state of the town moving forward. We adopted this in the middle of the Envision 2030 process, and we're looking at the larger horizons, and realized that we needed to make a few modifications to the Rights of Nature resolution to meet what we thought were the needs of the town, both now and in the coming decades. And so thank you very much to our water attorney, Aaron Ladd, who brought a couple comments to us, and also to all the members of the Board of Trustees who have participated in the discussions we've had looking at this. So I would like to open this up to members of the board if they'd have any comments before we take public comment on this. Trustee Apt?
I think this is a very good revision, and that it reflects the fact that we do have shared community values, and there was a lot of community support for this resolution, and we're respecting that at the same time, acknowledging that our water rights are valuable, and we plan to retain them while balancing that with the ecosystem we live in. They don't have to be mutually exclusive.
Sure. Thank you, Alan. Trustee Coombs Ismail?
Yeah, I'd second what Trustee Apt has just said. I'd only say that I remain convinced that the resolution as it was passed does not compromise our water rights in any way. And so while I'm in favor of the majority of these revisions, there are some of the revisions that I am not particularly in favor with, particularly striking the line about opposing new dams and dam expansions. And only for that reason would I be opposed to passing this revision. But by and large, I'm happy with it, other than that element.
Thank you, Eric. Trustee Taylor?
Well, my view remains what it was when we first reviewed this, that this is an ill-conceived resolution. My original complaints I will quickly summarize. Rights are only recently becoming useful for people. Rights of nature will dilute the meaning of that word and make human rights more abstract and more difficult to apply. I believe this resolution could be problematic in the future. As an example, I'd like to consider the second right that we are assigning to our water table through our resolution. And it states as follows: the watershed shall have the right to support essential functions within its ecosystem, including by horizontal and longitudinal connectivity, recharging groundwater, moving and depositing sediment, providing adequate habitat for native plants and animals. What is important is this: that is not a right. That is an obligation. Any set of creatures that have rights also have obligations, so that's not surprising. But in our resolution, we are assigning obligations to the watershed. And yet, we're referring to those obligations as rights. Why? because assigning obligations to a watershed seems a little odd. Here we are already diluting the meaning of the word right, and this is a concern. I myself would prefer to rescind this altogether and to consider an alternative resolution consistent with the principles of the World Wildlife Fund, which holds that nature is best defended by ensuring the rights of all humans to an unsullied natural environment. But I may well have failed to persuade. That is on me, it's my fault. And barring other options, like the one I just suggested, I will be voting in favor of the unadulterated text provided by our attorney, Attorney Ladd.
Thank you, Julian. Trustee Danforth?
Yeah, thank you. So I do agree also with what Julian and Eric have stated. I do think that the modifications are important, and I'm not in favor of rescinding the whole thing, but the modifications, I think, make it acceptable to me.
Thank you, Lindsay. Trustee Corporation?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna vote in favor of this. I felt like it was a little bit, just typical man taking charge of nature, because that's what we do as humans. The water is there to serve us and provide us drinking water. And when we got a little worried that that was going to be an issue, we backpedaled a little, and that's fine. We all need the water, and the river is there really for us. I'm going to argue a little bit with Julian about the obligation to the river. Of course, the river wants to do all those things, but it's people who build on the wetlands and who dam and pollute it and don't allow the river to do its obligations. And that's what this is basically discussing. I mean, if we humans weren't here, the rivers would be flowing however they wished, unimpeded and doing their obligation. But anyway, I feel like it's important to protect our water rights. And that is, overall, we are here to serve the people, not the water. So I'm in favor of this amendments.
Thank you, Tanya. Mayor Pro Tem Baumhover?
I guess my only comments would be to second what Julian has said, and I think he spoke very eloquently to the ill-conceived aspects of this venture and this resolution. However, I will also agree with what Alan has said, and reflecting on the values of this community, I will be voting in favor of this regardless of my own personal frustrations and disagreements with.
Thank you, Jonathan. This is an action item, so I will throw the floor open to members of the public who have joined us this evening. If you have a comment regarding the amendments to the Rights of Nature resolution, now would be your chance. Raise your hand, speak up.
I just want to remind the call-in, there is a call-in user that the *6 if that person needs to unmute.
Thank you, Miranda. Not seeing or hearing, I will bring this back to the Board of Trustees for any final comments, or if anyone would like to make a motion regarding Resolution 2021-11A. Any trustee like to make a motion to adopt or table the resolution before us?
I'll make a motion to adopt resolution 2021-11A.
Do we have a second?
Well, that's fascinating. So I may be the second.
We have a motion and a second. I was starting to wonder if I was on mute when I was asking for that.
No, I don't want to keep the old one.
Macy, would you please call the vote on the motion to approve?
Yes. Trustee Apt,
Alan, you're on mute. Can come
Macy?
back to Alan here in a moment.
sure, no problem. All right. So let's try Trustee Danforth,
Yes.
Trustee Coombs Ismail,
No.
Mayor Larson,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baumhover,
Yes.
Trustee Taylor,
Yes.
Trustee Corvallin,
Yes.
and Trustee Apt. Trustee Apt,
We may have lost Trustee Apt this evening.
okay.
He's not coming off mute and not coming on video anymore.
Interesting. All right.
To request. Macy, you could mark it as was not present to vote.
Great. Thank you.
All right, well, in that case, in either case, the motion to approve passes. So thank you all very much, and we will move on to our next action item of the evening, which is the appointment to a community board to community members to the Town Marshal Application Review Committee. Miranda.
Yeah, so on October 5th, when I brought before you the recruitment timeline, I had made a recommendation that when we get to a place where we're doing a full application review committee, which means the applications received have passed through an initial phase for minimum qualifications, that we would do a review of the applications that consist of the department heads, Trustee Coombs Ismail and Trustee Taylor, and then 4 community members. We requested that there be letters of support or letters of interest be sent to myself, and we received 7 letters by October 13th. So before you, I do believe we have some members here, but these 7 applicants did submit the reasons why they're interested in serving on this committee. And tonight we'd be looking for the board to narrow it down from 7 individuals to 4. The reason for that request is really 10 is still a lot to review applications, and any more can be a bit tough. So the ask is that you do narrow this down. So I'd love, Mayor Larson, if you're open, to invite some of those who are on tonight to share a little more why they're interested.
Absolutely, and before we do that, I just want to thank the 7 members of the community who came forward for volunteering. Thank you for putting yourselves out there to help us fill this incredibly important position within our town. So I'm going to go down. I see, the 7 names are on the screen, and I'm going to go down, and it's going to be basically an alphabetical order of how I see you on the participants list. So first on that list would be Atashna. Please, introduce yourself if we don't know you. Obviously, we know a lot of you, and let us know why you want to be involved in selection committee for the new town marshal.
Hi, my name is Atashna Medicine Shield Werner. I'm a 40-year resident of the Nederland area. I'm also a former business owner in Nederland. I'm very active in various boards and activities in the town. I've been a member of the ProSab board. And I also am a senior housing advocate who brokered the deal between the town of Nederland and Boulder County Housing Authority to bring Tungsten Village to the community. I have a strong human services background, and I feel that I would be able to remain impartial, look at both sides of situations. I can size up people pretty good. I have a lot of experience in human resources and engaging with people, very detail oriented in terms of looking at things like resumes and looking beyond the words on paper to more depthful perception of the person. So these are some of the reasons why I feel that I would make an excellent candidate, as well as representing older people in the town. I'm in my 70s. So thank you for considering my application.
Thank you, Atashna. Next on the alphabetical list, I see a Judy, and I'm thinking that's Judy Anderson.
I guess so. Hi.
Welcome.
Yeah, so I have not been involved in the politics of the town. I'm now, I've been learning more. I've been attending more of these meetings because since they're all virtual, and I love the fact they're virtual. I hope this never ends because it's just so easy to sit at home and, stay up until 11 o'clock at night, whatever, watching you guys do what you do. So, but I've been wanting to get more involved in the town. I haven't been in the 33 years that I've lived here. I've been kind of running the business and that kind of thing. And but I am on the Nederland Public Arts group, and we're working on the mural that's going to go up in spring when the weather gets better. But I'd like to be on this group too. I think that our officers are really important. What our police do are really important in this town. And I'd like to, have my input on that and help us find somebody really good. I think that's about all I have to say, unless you have questions.
Thank you, Judy. And yeah, couldn't agree more with the idea of keeping this virtual ability of these meetings going forward. So we've definitely seen better attendance and more people participating because of that. So thank you. Tom Marwald, I see you on here.
I'm here.
Yes.
Yeah. This is my second stint in Nederland. I've seen a slice of Nederland in the 70s and Nederland now. And also, having lived in Chicago, New York, and other places, I've seen good policing and I've seen really bad policing. And I know the impact that it brings. And these are going to be tough shoes to fill. And I think we got a lot at stake. Larry was with us for a long time. We were really, really lucky to have him here. I think maybe we take it for granted, but this is not going to be an easy position to fill. And I don't think there's too many things that touch us on an everyday basis. Like knowing we've got a town staff on the security side who's in tune with who we are, and helps keep us straight in a very gentle but authoritative way. So I've got a concern that we pick the right person. This is a longer term decision, almost like picking a judge. And so I want to make sure we get things right. I think we got some really good candidates. Yeah, my hand goes up for Atashna right away, having worked with her on the Envision process. So that's who I am. That's why I'm here. I think the candidates, everybody we've got is quite good, and I'd be happy whichever way we go. But I just want to put my hand up.
Thank you, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
Ron Mitchell.
I'm here and I'm interested in it because I've always been interested in just about everything Netherlands. The business community doesn't have a representative who's, other than myself, I think, really active in the business community. I feel that I could bring to the committee judgment. I've personally hired over 700 people myself, so I have experience with resumes and interviewing, and I would like to help and serve my community in that manner.
Thank you, Ron. I don't believe our other options or other applicants, Andrew or Chris, are on, or Katrina are online, unless they are one of the two colon users. So if Andrew, Katrina, or Chris are one of our colon users, now would be your time to speak up. And if you're on mute, remember *6 to unmute. Guessing that's a no to that. All right. So I will bring this back to the board. Just again with thank you, especially to the 4 of you who called in this evening to speak with us. Thank you for your interest and your volunteering for the town. I will take this to the Board of Trustees. If any of the members of the board have questions for any of our applicants, and then we'll take public comment and figure out how to narrow from 7 to 4. And we'll go in reverse order this time with Tanya.
Well, I mean, I'm kind of partial to the people who showed up today, just because they showed up. But as far as how are we going to narrow it down, I don't know. I guess we'll just have to vote. I
Did
don't.
you have any questions for the applicants that came that
No,
joined us this evening?
not really. No.
Okay. Lindsay?
I just want to say thank you to everyone who applied. We really appreciate you getting involved with our town. And I'm just sad that we can't appoint all of you. But hopefully, if you're not selected, that we can find another place on any one of our boards for you guys to participate.
Julian?
The letters of introduction were very illuminating, and I want to thank everyone who's here and certainly everyone who's spoken. I have no questions. I'm actually kind of have a, hopefully most of us kind of feel we have a preliminary list in our heads, and we'll move forward based upon whatever procedure the mayor suggests.
Okay, Julian? Eric?
Same from me. Thank you all for stepping up. It's really appreciated, and it really resonates with me, the job that this person has to fill, considering what Larry has done for our community for such a long time, far beyond the time that I've been here. And I'm really sad to be losing him. And I think it's a hugely important decision that we're making, as some of you have described. So thank you for stepping up.
Alan?
I concur with what has been said and don't really have any questions, and apologize for getting disconnected in the last item. I don't know why it happened, but it did, and I'm back. So anyway, thanks for voting for the resolution. And I thank everybody for applying for this committee. It's an important one, and we do have impossible shoes to fill. So thank you.
Welcome back, Alan. Mayor Pro Tem Baumover?
Don't have much more to add. Yeah, just like to thank members of the community for stepping up to be a part of this hiring committee and review committee. I would agree with what's been stated by the rest of the board. These are some large shoes to fill, and Larry has been a very strong member of this community and a kind of pivotal part of our police force for almost 2 decades now. And so I'm sorry to be losing him, and hoping that we can find somebody who can fill those shoes, both in character as well as an understanding of this town.
You're here. Well, before we come back to the board and tackle the difficult part of selecting 4 out of 7, I'm going to throw this open to public comment. If anyone on the public would like to speak on the matter of the appointment to the board, now would be your chance. You can have up to 3 minutes, as usual. Catch our attention in some way. Not seeing or hearing anyone. We will bring it back to the board. And I will, throw this open first for proposals from the trustees. If anyone has a immediate idea, I know we've heard one already as kind of the idea of those who have shown up here tonight being sort of the first cut possibility. But I would open this up for suggestions from the board. If you had a slate, if there's, if you'd like to propose a slate for vote, that would be an option. Or if you'd like to go one by one and go that way.
Mayor,
would like
it's
to-
Miranda. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Trustee Coombs as well.
I just would like to kind of do a plug here for Katrina Harm's participation on this committee. In her role with the Peak to Peak Housing and Human Services Alliance, she's somebody who has a really intimate knowledge with what the community's needs are in regards to human services, of which the police department is part. And it's somebody that represents an organization of organizations that will be working with the police department in the years to come. And so I think that's an important voice to have on this committee.
And I agree.
Mayor Larson, I was going to just note that, and I should have shared that earlier. Chris Perret and Katrina Harms have both shared that they did not think they would be able to make it tonight. So that is why they're not present. And I would, one recommendation I would have is to actually just vote one at a time. That might be cleaner for our records. If you
That
want
was going to be
Yeah.
the direction I went with this next. Yes, I was kind of leading that way in a roundabout manner, but yeah.
I would like to nominate Judy Anderson.
We have a nomination. Do we have a second for Judy Anderson?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second for Judy Anderson.
I have a question. Can we only vote 4 times then? Each one?
Well, I would think that, this is always the complicated. I've yet to come up with a good way to do this, and I've thought about it several different ways.
There are some decent ways to do this in person with
Yep.
everybody gets 4 dots and you line the
Right.
dots up. But this really does present kind of an interesting problem. I would think that enthusiasm, that is to say, who brings forth the name first, might count and help to prioritize. Just a thought. I don't know.
Yeah,
but-
my first thought was that, we're going to be voting on Judy Anderson because we have a motion on the table. But on that, I would say, no offense, Julian, but I would say Julian probably should not propose a second. We could do that kind of approach where we work our way through, where the next person we vote on is proposed or the motion is made by another trustee.
I think that's fine.
And we will go through, and if Judy gets a majority of the vote, then Judy will be on the board. And we'll basically go until we get a majority of the votes we'll get 4 people with majority of the votes. So it's gonna be the first 4 trustees who make motions. So if you have people you are passionate about, be prepared at the end of this vote.
Okay.
And so with that, Macy, if you would please call the vote on the appointment of Judy Anderson to the board, to the committee.
Mayor Larson,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baumhover,
Yes.
Trustee Danforth,
Yes.
Trustee Corvallin,
Yes.
Trustee Taylor,
Yes.
Trustee Apt,
Yes.
Trustee Coombs Ismail,
Yes.
And that would be a unanimous appointment. Congratulations, Judy, and thank you very much for.
And I would motion to nominate Katrina Harms if we're
taking me at my word there. Taking me at my word. All right, we have a motion for Katrina Harms. Do we have a second?
I second.
I'll second.
Oh, we have a motion and a second for Katrina Harms. Macy, please.
Mayor Larson,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baumhover,
Yes.
Trustee Danforth,
Yes.
Trustee Corvallin,
Yes.
Trustee Taylor,
Yes.
Trustee Apt,
Yes.
Trustee Coombs Ismail,
Yes.
All right. Katrina is also appointed to the committee. Do we have a third nomination?
I'd like
would
to nominate Tom Malwald.
I'll second.
We have a nomination and second for Tom Malwald.
okay. So we have Mayor Larson,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baumhover,
Yes.
Trustee Danforth,
Yes.
Trustee Corvallin,
Yes.
Trustee Taylor,
Yes.
Trustee Apt,
Yes.
Trustee Coombs Ismail,
Yes.
Thank you, Tom. Congratulations. Do we have a final motion or a
I-
next motion?
I
Tanya?
would like to nominate Chris Perret.
We have a motion for Chris Perret. Do we have a second?
Second.
okay. Mayor Larson,
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Baumhover,
Yes.
Trustee Danforth,
No.
Trustee Corvallin,
Yes.
Trustee Taylor,
No.
Trustee Apt,
Yes.
Trustee Coombs Ismail,
Yes.
Thank you. Chris Perret, you are appointed to the committee, and I believe that is 4 seats filled. Again, to all 7, thank you so much for stepping forward, for volunteering for this town. And we really look forward to hearing from you in the coming weeks with regards to the applicant pool. Thank you all so much.
And to the individuals who are on this call, I will send a follow-up email with next steps, which is primarily securing a date and time for us to review the applications received.
Thank you.
All right. Moving right along into our next action item this evening, which is regarding the Colorado Opioid Settlement Memorandum of Understanding. And I believe our town attorney will be introducing this one to us. Jennifer.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the Board of Trustees. The Memorandum of Understanding related to the opioid settlement agreements is before you tonight. There is, as you all are probably aware, there's a significant opioid epidemic. The opioid epidemic has claimed approximately 500,000 lives in the period of 1999 to 2019. And that is from overdoses related to prescription opioids and also illegal opioids like heroin. Because of this epidemic, a lot of states and local governments took it upon themselves to bring lawsuits against the manufacturers and distributors of opioids. There have been approximately 3,000 of these lawsuits that have been combined under a category of multi-district litigation, where one judge is shepherding these cases through. And then in this multi-district litigation, there have been recent settlements with the big 3 distributors and 1 manufacturer. These settlements will result in approximately $26 billion of money paid out to states and local governments. Colorado is expected to receive approximately $400 million from this $26 billion settlement. That $400 million will be paid over the course of 18 years. Related to these settlements, the requirement was that the states get together with their local governments and figure out an allocation for the settlement money that was coming to them. So the Attorney General, Colorado Attorney General, several local governments within Colorado that were involved in these lawsuits worked to create this MOU. And what this MOU does is, one, it designates what these settlement funds from the opioid settlements may be used for. That's the approved purposes that are outlined in this Memorandum of Understanding. And then it also provides an allocation formula to split out this money. And the allocation formula is 10% goes to the state, and the state can use that 10% on any approved purposes. 20% would go to local governments who sign on to the MOU. So Nederland would get some of this 400 million. 60% would go to regions. There is a map that this joint group put together for these regions. Boulder County is one region. And then 10% would go to a state fund that would be used for infrastructure related to the opioid problem. So in order to get any money from these settlements, local governments do have to sign on to this MOU. For the town, the money that would be received directly under the local government share is probably a very small amount of money over 18 years, where the town could have receive a bigger impact is in this regional share, where Boulder County would receive money from the 60% allocation. In the regional share, there is a requirement under the MOU that the regional that the regions put in place a regional council, and that regional council would decide essentially how that pot of money is distributed. So all in all, I think it's a good idea for Nederland to sign on. There's no downside. For the local government share, Nederland can decide to essentially give that money to the county, to the region, rather than keeping it. And that is a year-by-year decision that the Board of Trustees would be able to make in terms of, do we want to keep this money, or do we want to give it to the county to be used for county-wide services? So that's the overview of this. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jennifer. And just to be clear, that decision on whether we keep the $500 a year that we get from this settlement to ourselves or give the county, that's a decision we would make next year once the monies arrive, not tonight, correct?
Correct. The only decision tonight is whether you want it to agree to this, agree to the MOU. There are some documents that need to be signed, and so the resolution would give the town administrator the authority to sign the MOU and then other settlement documents.
All right, thank you. Trustees, do you have questions for Jennifer regarding this item? Mayor Pro Tem Baumhofer, start with you this time.
Didn't really have many questions. I think it would be smart for us to sign on to this, and it sounds like the decision of whether or not we would allow county to use that money or take our small sliver of it comes later. Is that correct?
Yes.
I'm all in favor of signing on for this. Let's not leave potential money floating around.
All right. Eric.
No questions. I think we should do this.
All right. Alan?
I don't have any questions, and I think it's a good idea to sign on. I do think it's unfortunate that the corporations involved literally got away with murder. The executives got off scot-free, and they, through bankruptcy proceedings, actually got off lightly in terms of the financial proceeds as well. But we don't want to be foolish, and we should take what we can get.
Yeah, that one was unfortunately well above our pay grades on the Board of Trustees. Tanya.
I also agree we should sign.
Okay. Lindsay?
No questions. I think this is a no-brainer.
Yeah. Julian?
If I'm recalling correctly, the actions that were attempted against the tobacco industry were not even quite as successful as this one. And I'm hoping this perhaps is practice for actions against certain other industries who have done tremendous damage, knowing full well they were doing it. So yes, I'm all for this, and I'm hopeful that this is training wheels for a vehicle that may help us bring further actions of this sort against other industries.
I like that take on it. I was feeling negative about that, but that makes me feel hopeful again. So thank you.
And one other thing I do want to mention is that this memorandum of understanding with the state and with everybody who participates, this would apply to future settlements against other opioid defendants. So if there's a settlement that would pay out money to states and local governments, this allocation and approved purpose list would apply to that distribution of money.
So not only against the Sackler family, but if some fourth company is sued, this then takes a precedence over that.
Yes, and I honestly don't know how many other lawsuits are out there.
Yeah.
Who are the other defendants? I think this is the big ones.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how many other settlements there would be, but there are other defendants.
Yeah. Okay. This is an action item, so I will throw this open to the public comment. If anyone would like to comment on the town signing on to this MOU, now would be your opportunity, having heard the rundown of it from our town attorney and the initial thoughts from the Board of Trustees. Catch our attention? Let us know. I will bring this back to the Board of Trustees and look if anyone has a motion regarding Resolution 2021-22.
I move to approve. I'm going to let Trustee Coombs Esmail do this.
It's a kind of annoying one. I move to approve Resolution 2021-22, delegating authority to execute necessary documents and issue town approvals for participation in the Colorado Opioid Settlement Memorandum of Understanding to the town administrator.
Do we have a second? We have a second from Trustee Taylor. Thank you. Macy, if you would call the vote on this one.
Yep. All right, so we have Trustee Taylor.
Yes.
Trustee Danforth.
Yes.
Trustee Apt.
Yes.
Trustee Coombs Ismail.
Yes.
Mayor Larson.
Yes.
Trustee Corvallin.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baumhover.
Yes.
All right.
All right. Thank you all very much. The motion passes unanimously. And look at that, it is 7:49 p.m. and we are out of the action items for this evening and into our discussion items, of which we have 3, beginning with the building code, adoption of the 2018 building codes. And we are going to go right back to our town attorney, Jennifer Madsen, for this one.
So we actually changed it up on you, Mayor Larson. I'm gonna take this. I have no phone to share that message with. So yeah, it's exciting to be a discussion already. So before you tonight is the draft ordinance 823 adopting 2018 building code. So a point of clarification actually on the next steps is tonight actually does serve as the first reading for this ordinance. We would, despite this being discussion, we would be looking for a motion from the Board of Trustees to schedule the public hearing and the second reading on November 16th. So as stated here, and we're happy to bring back though the ordinance on November 9th if there was a desire of the Board of Trustees. But I think really tonight we're just looking to see if you have any questions, feedback, comment, things you'd like us to consider in this draft ordinance.
Does that mean we need to also make this an action item this evening?
I did ask Attorney Madsen that and she said no.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we can make a motion to schedule it as a discussion item.
Correct.
Okay.
And I did send a motion to a couple of you.
Yes. Yeah, the motion to schedule it for the meeting. Right.
Yes.
All right. Well, yeah, this is something we have talked about a while, so I will throw this open to Board of Trustees. Do you have having had another chance to read through this and look it over, have any additional questions for town staff? We'll begin with Trustee Danforth.
No questions at this time.
Okay. Trustee Apt?
Yes, I'm glad to hear that we are going to improve the insulation in new homes. I think that will benefit people in the long run. I guess one other improvement I'd like to suggest that we consider would be that for homes that are over 3,200 square feet, we require that they include a solar system to offset their carbon. This is similar to what Boulder County's doing, and I think, it ensures us keeping in line with our sustainability goals, and also provides benefits to the homeowner in terms of getting their electricity from the sun rather than fossil fuels. I'd like to put that forward to the consideration of the board as an addition to the building codes.
Okay. Is that, I guess sounds like you've looked into this. Is that something Boulder County has adopted within its building codes, or is that a separate policy on behalf of the town or the county?
That I don't know.
Okay.
Jonathan, do you have any idea about that? I know Jonathan has some background on this.
Boulder County did just like a full rewrite of their energy code. So I believe, I can double check, but I believe it is integrated into their pretty extensive energy code.
Okay. Just curious. All right.
I guess my statement there would be there are requirements within this code for HERS ratings, blower test doors, and generally you're given around 7 options and you have to choose about 4 of them. One of those options, is solar panels, additionally, electric car chargers, various other options to essentially meet the HERS rating. But as it's set up, it does allow the homeowners to kind of individualize how they meet that code. So if they have certain priorities as a homeowner and what they would like installed, they get to choose those. I am not against the requirement, however, of requiring a conduit be run up to the roof line and that essentially space saved inside the breaker box, so that should the home change hands and there is a new homeowner, that homeowner simply has to hire Namaste or whatever solar company they see fit to come in and install the grid, and they can just simply pull wire down that conduit to an already designated section of their breaker box and allow for easy installation. I believe that's kind of what Alan is suggesting. We take the extra step and at least require the infrastructure, so to speak, for solar to be added onto these houses. I would have to do a little bit more review on the codes themselves to see if, I guess I'm not 100% for requiring folks to get solar panels so long as they are meeting their HERS ratings, but I do think it would be intelligent for any home over 3,200 square feet to have that adaptability built into them so that future homeowners can very easily just put a solar grid on their roof and have it tied into their breaker without having to do surgery on the house, so to speak, to make that a reality.
Thank you.
So basically requiring people to make the home solar ready rather than requiring them to install solar panels. Is there a reason, just for my own information, is there a reason why 3,200 square feet is a magic number here?
Not necessarily. It's outlined in other areas when you're talking about building size. I mean, anything over 3,200 square feet, you're getting into pretty much above $1 million, maybe multi-million dollars, especially with our cost of building currently. So I think the idea or justification there is at that point, you're already spending a couple million on a home, and what we would be requiring would literally maybe add a couple $1,000s, if even.
Okay, so it's not like an energy efficiency breakpoint or anything.
Not to my knowledge, but there might be other folks. I'm more on the framing, finish,
sure,
actual building side of it, less on the HERS rating electrical side of my knowledge. I can pull wires and I know what requirements are, but in terms of energy efficiency, I usually look to pretty much the electricians and the inspectors, as well as energy consultants.
Fair enough.
It certainly seems like it's fairly inexpensive for a new home, relatively. If it's a new home and it has a garage or a carport, it just seems like it would be a major it would be a major hole not to provide a 220-volt outlet to charge a car, and that's not terribly expensive. If you haven't already wired everything up and you've got nothing but 110, if you're building a new home, it looks like that would be a pretty straightforward thing to do. But I'm not in favor of requiring it, but certainly as having it as an option, I think it's going to get chosen as an option.
I would be in favor of requiring maybe the same thing to make it ready. So essentially there's a conduit run through the wall, but electric car chargers actually do come in around $25,000-$30,000 to install that into your garage. It has to be a dedicated home run circuit back to your breaker box. You have to actually increase your main ampage coming in from your weatherhead, and it actually is quite a significant investment.
You're meaning to get to 220 volts from 110.
Essentially what's going to come into your breaker box is going to be 240, if not even more, and then it will be broken out in there depending upon your home runs, so to speak. So for the car charger, it has to be, that's the only thing that can be on that circuit, so you're dedicating one circuit entirely to that. And it also has to be at least 12, if not 10 gauge wire. I think those are 10 gauge, if not even 8 gauge wire these days. So wire is quite expensive. So that's why I would argue if we want to require that there is simply a conduit run, then with, a pull wire, anybody who chooses to install an electric car charger in their garage would then just have to take off a cover plate, attach the wire, pull it into the breaker box, and voila, you're ready to go. Whereas if we don't require that and folks choose to go for the other four options to meet their HERS rating, somebody who moves in that might want an electric car charger will then have to open up the wall and run wire back to their breaker box.
Yeah, it depends on the house, I suppose, because we installed our separate 220 volt outlet for $500. So but that's partly because we were ready. So I'm agreeing with Jonathan. Set up ready, and I think the price is manageable.
Yeah, it sounds like the idea of putting language in here to be solar ready, to be electric car ready, whatever the official language
Yeah.
is for that, is something we might want to look at for this next reading.
Yeah. Provide options, and those options in the upcoming years are going to look more and more appealing.
Yep. Jonathan, did you have other comments about it, about the code?
You know, I'm overall, I still side with the fact that I don't really see that much of a benefit of the 2018 codes versus the 2015 codes beyond electrical. Updating our electrical code, I think, is necessary. I guess one thing that I always come back to in this town is we have a lot of buildings that are just not compliant with any building code, even 2008 building code. And the more that we update these codes, the more difficult we make it for the lower and middle class to build homes as well as to improve their homes and their dwellings. I can let that go, but there is one thing that I still have an issue with, which is the requirement of sprinkler systems. And this just comes from my experience as a builder in unincorporated Boulder County, where this is already a requirement and has been for quite some time, and the just drastic cost increase that this requirement alone adds to any home. You're looking at $50,000 to $60,000. And I notice in here that while it only requires an automatic residential fire system, you know, it says in townhomes. So I guess I'm looking for our definition of a townhouse. And seeing that there's an exception for one-time additions not exceeding 200 square feet. But I guess what I start to see is, okay, let's say we have a 400 square foot cabin in Old Town that somebody buys, and they want to add a bathroom and a bedroom to it to make it more than just a single room mining cabin. All of a sudden, they're going to have to install a residential fire suppression system because the square footage of that existing home is, let's say, maybe 400 square feet, and they decide to add an additional 250 square feet. Let's be realistic, probably more like 300 square feet. Then we're going to be requiring the rest of that house to be gutted to allow for the installation of these fire suppression systems. So I would like to see a little bit more forethought go into the requirement of fire sprinkler systems when it comes to the remodeling of existing homes in the town of Nederland that are very low on their square footage and very non-code compliant to begin with. I don't really have a problem with requiring, you know, these new homes that are going up that are already at 3,500, 4,000 square feet. I think that's fine to require them to have a sprinkler system installed because they are being built from the ground up, and that can be part of the design process. But to put this requirement on all homes as it is currently written, you're creating a situation where folks are not going to be able to update their homes. I'm largely thinking of Old Town in a lot of areas and some of the residents along First Street as well as Third Street, Fifth Street, that folks in the town of Nederland kind of, you can see it's why we have a lot of the quirky architecture, is homes are continually added onto to suit the needs of the current resident. And as this is written, we are almost shooting ourselves in the foot, because as soon as somebody wants to add on to maybe, you know, these smaller homes and improve them, we're basically gonna require that they gut their whole house simply to install a sprinkler system. And while it is argued by our fire marshal that they would like to have standalone homes, I think in the event of a forest fire, there is very little benefit that a in-home interior fire suppression system is actually going to help them to defend homes against fires that are coming at the exterior of houses. So I think we need to do a lot more work to really lock this down, and where we are actually requiring fire sprinkler systems in new builds, but not requiring them in existing homes whatsoever, even with additions. I think it puts too much of a burden on landowners if they are trying to remodel. And what you're going to get is basically a bunch of contractors finding creative ways to drop their square footage so that they don't have to do this. And it's going to put an unnecessary burden on landowners to have to remodel in such ways to avoid this requirement versus remodeling to make their homes more functional. And I think that when folks update our homes in the town of Nederland, it's a benefit to our community, to the buildings themselves. And there are a lot of other issues that get solved when we remodel those homes, such as addressing electrical systems that don't have grounds in them whatsoever, which is far beyond the code. So I would really push the rest of this board to consider how much benefit a internal sprinkler system really has for creating a standalone home, because in the event of a forest fire, that interior sprinkler system is not going to be helping them stop a fire on the outside.
Yeah,
Can I
so
ask a
John,
question? Sorry.
go ahead, Eric. I think you might have found the same thing I did.
Well, I just understood it as being for structures that were over 4,800 square feet.
Right.
Not anything below that.
Right. The one or two family dwelling with additions, when the sum of the total floor areas of the addition plus the existing is increased to 4,800 square feet or greater. So the cabin in Old Town is exempt, even if it's a 200 square foot cabin that you're adding 600 square feet to, it's exempt from the sprinkler rules.
I see that. So then right above it, R13 or 313.1 townhouse automatic sprinkler system, an automatic residential fire sprinkler system shall be installed in all townhouses. So let's look
When
at
it's increased to over 4,800.
No, I think
that's
for all
the
new
addition.
builds.
That's to the addition. So what we're saying is all new builds need a fire sprinkler system.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I'm not sure if I'm in agreement with that.
Okay. Okay.
But
the
the
example
addition
of
thing
Old
is not an
Town was,
Yeah.
I think that's not, doesn't fall into this. No matter what you do to that Old Town cabin, it's not going to need a residential sprinkler.
Well,
Unless you
then
scrape it and
I
build a
guess
new
I
house.
see how you guys are reading that, and you're right. I was reading that out of there. But my real issue is with requiring automatic fire sprinkler systems on new builds in the town of Nederland. We're getting to a point with our codes that affordable housing is becoming a non-reality. And I get the reasons we're doing it, but I also have only heard from the fire marshal the justification being we want standalone homes. And I don't see how having a fire sprinkler system inside the home makes that house a standalone home for our fire protection district in the event you have a wildfire, because it's not like if that sprinkler system kicks on inside the home, it's going to help them defend the outside of your home.
I guess I always understood it as if the fire starts within the home, the sprinkler system protects it from turning into a wildfire that spreads.
And I get that, but our precedents for having fires start with inside the home, let's be honest, are illegal marijuana, hemp productions, and already illegal actions. So I don't think that we should be legislating based upon the lowest common denominator.
No, but I also see what happened in Boulder this morning. So.
Oh, what was that? I missed that.
Oh
man,
it
was brutal.
Giant apartment building with 87 units burned to the ground.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
But okay, good. It's a good point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
may I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem Baumhofer, you've expressed some concerns in this regard, and I agree with you to a large degree about the internal fire systems. And I'm wondering if I would really appreciate seeing some suggested wording from you, because I think the board would be open to what you're proposing. If you could suggest some wording for,
I would,
not
my
now, but I mean for
suggestion
later
would
on, that would
be,
be really helpful.
I guess, just throwing it out there. It's kind of an arbitrary number, but I would say we exempt any homes under 2,000 square feet
Okay.
from an automatic fire system.
Okay.
I'm
I guess
looking,
I mean, it's just nice having a number. Yeah.
Yeah.
in the spirit of that, Mayor Pro Tem Baumhofer, I mean, it seems to me that townhomes is a tough one there because townhomes are homes that are connected to each other, and in a way, in some ways, you're being protected from what someone else does in your building, rather than from yourself. And so I can really see an argument there for requiring it in townhomes, because it's usually done by a developer anyway. There's no individual who's building a block of townhomes to live in. But in particular, it's section 313.2, R313.2, I think that we could make maybe an adjustment on, and maybe put a square footage on that. I would be pretty interested in that.
I could agree to that, because you are right. I'm looking at townhomes and I'm thinking of the Little Bear complex and going, okay, you have, two homes per building there. And yes, you would want to be protected to some degree to what's happening next to you. And in that case, I can see the justification for it more. When it comes to the 1 to 2 in families, I look also at the precedents and the minutes that we have from the last iteration when we updated the 2015 code, and the specific impetus for amending that code so that this requirement was not put on 1 and 2 family dwelling units was specifically to look at our goal of affordable housing. And right now we already have a very, very high cost of building in the town of Nederland that has only been aggravated by the pandemics and the supply issues, which is continuing to happen. So I very much hear that when it comes to townhomes and when we're looking at, these larger new builds, it is not as big of an issue. But I still fundamentally don't understand where on a 1 to 2 family home, the automatic fire suppression system on the interior is helpful. I would be more in favor of adding into this, well, it's a different requirement, but we have home insurance companies now that actually retain on retainer hotshot crews and specifically build in and come to your home and give you a mitigation understanding and say, in the event of a forest fire, this is how we would protect your home. This is what we need you to do to be able to do that. In our wild, the wild urban interface, and particularly where we are in the town of Nederland, knowing that we will have to deal with a wildfire, I would rather see a requirement for exterior systems that foam the houses, the outside of the houses. If one of these systems goes off, it's a nightmare to deal with. And some of these systems are very, very sensitive and can go off simply through heavy work being done on the house. So it's a question to me of balancing the real needs of our fire protection district and also allowing individuals to take their own risk. I get to a point sometimes when you require certain legislation that almost tries to bubble wrap the world, I guess is how I would say it, and take all the risk out of the equation, especially when in doing so you put an undue burden on individuals to pay for that. I think we should still allow citizens to make that decision. anybody, if they choose to, can still choose to install one of these systems. But as soon as we require it for 1 and 2 family dwellings, it's set in stone. And now every home that's built has to have this additional 40 to 60,000, sometimes topping more than. So I could hear that townhomes are absolutely fine, but I would love to see a exemption placed on 1 and 2 family dwelling units that are under, I would go even, 2,000 square feet sounds fine to me.
2,000 is our opening, and we can, maybe draft that language and then think about it over the next couple weeks.
But I'm also very open to the fire marshal's input about, the idea of having this standalone homes during a wildfire. I guess I would want an answer to the question of how does an internal fire suppression system help that house be standalone in the event of a wildfire that is coming at the exterior of the home.
All right.
Can
Thank
I
you,
comment on
Jonathan.
that?
Let's get all the comments from the board here before, and then I'm gonna open up to public. But yeah, I definitely want you to be able to comment on that, Rick.
Okay.
Julian, I wanted to hit you up next. Did you have any thoughts or comments on what we've, other thoughts and comments?
No, I jumped in and I kind of had the feeling I'd already spoken. So I'm done. Yeah, this is fine. More scintillating reading.
How about you, Tanya?
I do like the idea of solar ready and car ready, electric car ready. Seems like an easy thing to add. As far as the interior sprinkler system goes, I understand. Well, I thought it was like about $2 a square foot to add these. Is that not correct? I mean, that's just when you do like a research. How much do these systems cost to put in a 3,000 square foot home? I'm just curious.
Well, I think that's what John was saying, was something on the order of, 50,000.
50,000, yeah. As well as design features and architecture features of where are you going to put these systems in your roof framing. Most of the houses, on your roof, if you're built with trusses, you have to specifically map these things out so that it depends on if you really want an on-site sprinkler thing coming through your roof all over the place, or how it runs, and then it has to be incorporated with your lighting plan, it has to be incorporated with your gas plan, it has to be incorporated with your furnaces. They're required to be so far from any heat sources, which then means they have to be designed around fireplaces, they have to be designed around your conduit, depending if you're forced air, radiant heat, yada, yada, yada. So there's a lot of inputs that come.
I mean, I could see it being horrible for a remodel, but for a new build, it's just, I think doesn't seem that difficult. But I don't know, I don't build. So my other point is, I am a neighbor of one of the houses. We have 2 houses that blew up on our street. So it's not as uncommon as you guys think. And one of them had a sprinkler system, and I think I was told by Rick Durr and other people who worked on that fire that pretty much saved that house from being completely destroyed and spreading to the neighbor's house, which, even though these people have half-acre lots, they're building such big houses that there was probably only 30 feet, 40 feet between the houses. So I do, being a neighbor of one of these homes, and this was a really nice house that people were doing this in. So part of me is like, well, nobody's gonna grow weed, or they weren't growing, whatever, extracting in a really nice brand new build, but this was a brand new build that this happened in. So I would change it from 2,000 square feet to 1,000 or 1,500 square feet to appeal to people who are trying to build an affordable home. I think 2,000 square feet is actually pretty large house. So that's my feedback on that. I get you wanting to allow people to build smaller houses and not have to add, an extra cost to it. But as we're in this fire world, and it seems a responsible thing to do. That's just my opinion. And I lived near 2 of these houses that blew up, so it's pretty common. I have had a lot of friends, actually. Some of them have died in house fires. So it's not as uncommon as everybody's thinking here, to have a house start a fire from the inside. So that is all. As far as what else, I feel like we've gone over quite a bit, and I'm pretty okay with it. The code.
Okay. Thank you, Tanya. Eric?
No, I don't think I have any additional questions.
All right. Yeah, I think with that, I would like to turn this over to the public, and beginning with Rick. Can address some of the things you've heard. Rick Hendrickson.
Hi, this is Rick Hendrickson, Fire Marshal for Nederland Fire Protection District. Just to comment on a couple of the things that have been talked about. First thing is on the standalone comment. I think that maybe been misconstrued from something else we were talking about, which was the exterior flammability standards, because that definitely makes the house stand alone. The primary purpose of an interior sprinkler system is life safety. Yes, it generally puts out the fire. Yes, if a fire does get larger and gets outside the house, it does prevent that. But really, the standalone portion had to do with the exterior flammability. And yet, you're absolutely right, Jonathan, that an interior sprinkler system does very little for a wildfire approaching, probably nothing at all. Question on costs. I've been talking to sprinkler installers and builders for a couple of years now. I only know of one residential sprinkler system that's gone over about 30,000, and that was in a relatively small house that is very unique, shall we say, and is probably looking at a $2 million price tag for a small house. And they've had to make a lot of changes, and that system got changed a bunch and had to get around a lot of architectural features. Everybody else I'm talking to is somewhere in 15,000, 20,000 at the most for the current kind of average 3,000 square foot house that seems to be going up right now in our neighborhood. The other comment I have is mentioned that the systems are fragile and have leaks. I'm not aware of that.
Well, I wasn't saying leaks. I was more thinking of like when you go into, let's say, demo a fireplace that is wrapped in stone, and you're using heavy power tools near these things with scaffold and whatnot, that it's generally our practice based upon the JLC to protect those and to provide protection for them.
Sure.
So that there isn't an accidental. I do know of 2 houses where things have happened in the construction process, largely because of lack of common sense on construction workers' parts, but it becomes a huge property damage liability.
Absolutely. Protect them from physical damage is important. Their heat ratings are high enough. They're typically 160 to 180 degrees before they would open. That's going to require an awful lot of heat. I think it's the same thing as as far as contractors working in the house with that, they need to be aware. Kind of like when they built my house, and the contractor said everybody has to leave their hammers in their trucks when they're putting the windows in. Don't want to run the risk of breaking one. I think it's the same kind of, like you said, common sense on stuff. Back to the square footage. If the board wants to put a square footage floor on it, that's up to you. Understand that, again, the primary purpose for these, going back to when we first started talking about this, is life safety. And does it make sense to protect a big house but not a small house and the occupants of it? So that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Other members of the public want to weigh in on the building codes?
This is Ron. Mitchell.
Yeah, Ron, floor is yours.
I just had a chance to look over some of those codes, and there's one of them that I have never seen before that deals with the residential buildings and has occupancy limits. I didn't have a chance to find it. I was looking for it today, but I will again, which seems to create more confusion in that it says that every bedroom in an existing building has to have a linear wall of at least 7 feet. And the first occupant has to have 70 square feet in the room, which would be a 10 by 7 room. And then the second occupant has to have another 30 square feet. And so that's 130 square feet or a 13 by 10 bedroom. I bet there aren't very many of those in Old Town at all. They're all smaller. So I really think that particular code and those provisions you just ought to throw out because somebody's going to come along and say, well, you can't comply. You got to remodel your house or vacate this room as a bedroom if it's 2 or 3 feet underneath it, under the amount. And there's no route of appeal. Has always been my complaint about a lot of things with the codes, that there has to be, I feel, some route of appeal from things that are too harsh in a given situation. So I would like you to, I want to find that code and study it more thoroughly and come back with a recommendation.
Yeah, please, if you can email us that, because I've looked through here and I did not see that, and I just did a quick search and can't find it either. So if you can highlight that, point it out to us.
I'll try to find it in the next day or two.
Okay, thanks, Ron. Any other members of the public? Kathleen, I see your hand up. Yeah, your hand's up. Go ahead, Reed, speak.
Let me pull it up.
If you're on calling in on the phone, Kathleen, you'll need to *6.
I've got it. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, I can hear you, Miranda.
I need to stop sharing so I can read this. Kathleen Chabai, I'm wondering if anyone on the Building Code Administrative Committee consisting of Miranda Fisher, Town Administrator, Cynthia Bakke, Deputy Zoning Administrator, Chris Pelletier, Public Works Manager, Rick Hendrickson, Fire Marshal, Gary McDaniel, Sustainability Coordinator, has read all the thousands of pages of building code proposed for adoption. And in Netherlands history, change of use meant a person or business did not have a use by right to whatever use they intended or hoped for. So they had to go through a special use review that would include public hearings and a BOT vote. A person or business going through a special review use is asking the public and the town for permission to do something contrary to zoning. The IBC uses terms change of use and change of occupancy interchangeably. In the last decade, the town has forced people and businesses to fill out building permits and pay a fee as they say there is a change of occupancy, even when people are zoned use by right.
Okay, thank you, Kathleen. Anyone else from the public?
This is Billy Gibbon. Can you hear me?
You're very, very faint, Billy.
Okay, let me try this.
Can you hear me here?
Now, you're better now. Yep, welcome.
Okay, of course, my daughter just walked in and she's losing it. All right, I'll be quick on my 3 minutes here. Just at bedtime. So real quick, I do agree with actually Ron, that 70 square foot for a bedroom seems like one thing, but to double it just because it's like, say, for a couple seems crazy. The main things I want to comment on though are I do think sorry about that with my daughter. I do think that indoor sprinkler systems for remodels does seem extraneous. It sounds like that's not going to happen. That's what we were told in the planning commission meeting. So for new builds, I think maybe more research should be done before you guys pick 2,000 square feet or 1,500 square. Those numbers just seem kind of random right now. Maybe some real research is done on picking a number if you put a limit. I like the idea of a limit, actually. You know, if you're going to have it, I think below a certain size it's reasonable not to have them, but maybe more research on that. on picking a square footage limit. Solar ready is the term. I agree. Larger homes should be wired, with a conduit, with the extra structure they might need on the roof for a solar array, with the placeholder for what's going to happen near the panel. That needs to happen for larger homes. And I also think on the HERS index, people just putting in a bunch of solar to offset things. They could build a total energy hog and then put a bunch of solar on it. I think it really, we're focusing on those HERS limits based on square footage, and really looking at the HERS score before they add solar is really the bigger deal. Because you can always just buy your way out of using a lot of energy. The last two things I did want to comment on the code. I am used to seeing a grace period where there's a voluntary date, like a voluntary compliance date, and then sometime later, maybe 6 months or a few months, a mandatory compliance date. I know the town staff did a lot of good work interviewing local contractors and getting them on board with this new code. But I do feel like, say putting it in place on January 1st, but making it truly mandatory for the homeowners who might want a permit and not know the code to have some time to really comply, like maybe July 1st or something. So having a grace period between voluntary compliance and mandatory compliance, that's pretty common in most municipalities around the country, actually, much more than just a dead stop date. And then the last thing, I'll probably bring this to the Planning Commission, I don't know, but I feel like the frost line depth for excavation in this town is pretty darn deep, 48 inches for, given our actual climate. Grand County across the mountains is 30 inches. I did see, Leadville has 48 inches, but most of the similar towns and, Boulder County around us, it's 30 inches. So that's just something else I'd like you guys to consider, that 48 inches is just a lot of digging. I think that's everything.
Great. Thank you, Billy. Thanks for a lot of things to look into. Thanks. Any other members of the public want to weigh in? Not seeing any. I'll bring this back to the board. So does the boards, we've discussed a bunch of different things, the idea of solar ready, electric car ready, this idea of a size floor for single family homes that require a automatic sprinkler system, whether that, trying to come up with a number that has some basis in it, whether it's 1,500 square feet, 2,000 square feet, or what has a logical, definable reason behind it. Are those the things does that capture the bulk of our conversation?
Mayor, it's Miranda, I do have a question for the solar EV charger ready homes. Are we sticking to that 3,200 square feet, or is it for all new builds? I didn't necessarily feel like the board landed on.
I was the one who brought that up, and I wasn't thinking in terms of size of home. I was thinking in terms of if it is a new home and the home is accommodating an automobile of some sort, it seems like it's Mayor Pro Tem Baumhofer was absolutely right. If you've got everything built already and you haven't prepared for it, yeah, that would be expensive because you would have to break in some walls and do a lot of work. But it strikes me as a reasonable thing to do before you've completely framed the house, to run some conduit and be ready to install a charger. And so I wasn't thinking that would be tied to a particular size.
I would agree. I mean, the 3,200 trigger
I'm
is
sorry.
aimed more at solar panels, not solar ready. So I think solar ready, I would agree with Julian. It should be all new builds. And then, I don't have any support for requiring solar panels. So that would have been triggered by 3,200 square feet, which is what Boulder County does.
Yeah, and it just seems even a small home or a townhome. So my son wanted to buy an electric car, but he lives in an apartment in Boulder and there's no way to charge it. So he didn't get an electric car. So just as if you're going to be driving a car, better to take the bus, but if you're going to be driving a car, it would be awfully nice if the house was built ready to charge that car. Yeah, so I wasn't thinking of there being a size limit on it.
So perhaps we bring back for the next reading, solar ready, electric car ready for all the new builds, and language in the automatic sprinkler. Maybe we draft it with 2,000 square feet, but then we flag that as a discussion item for the first reading.
Can I make a suggestion here? I can agree with the solar ready for all new builds because that is really not hard. It means you got to look at your weight load limits, your snow load limits, your wind load limits on your roof system and make sure that it can support the extra weight of a solar grid. Most roofs up here, because of our snow load requirements, already have that built into them. I think for an electric car charger, particularly in our mountains, we could simply tie that into if it has a garage, whether or not that garage is attached or detached. You must make that garage solar car or,
Electric
car
car.
charger ready. And I think that's a very easy way to move it away from the square footage. Now, listening, I can 100% agree that square footage is very arbitrary to put a sprinkler system on. So I think we should potentially look at, instead of square footage, the architectural details of that plan. We happen to know that high ceilings now, open floor plans, walls over 10 feet, and rooms over 10 feet have far more capacity to catch fire and catch fire far quicker due to the airflow. Air is what drives a fire. Without oxygen, fires die out. And so a lot of our smaller cabins in town and a lot of our smaller buildings that are built more on a budget minded and simply meet the living space requirement for their ceilings are not necessarily as apt to catch fire. And when fires occur in those buildings, they have less airflow, so they're less likely to take off. So I would rather see this fire sprinkler system attached to architectural details and not square footage. That will involve more work on this committee and town staff to kind of dial that down, but I believe that's also written into the code. And those are some of the changes we're seeing in framing code in between 2015 and 18 is an awareness and an acknowledgement of this. I guess the last thing that I always would want to comment on is the unintended consequences of legislating buildings to be built with safety in mind. While I 100% hear what Trustee Corvallin is saying about the homes that have caught fire on Big Springs, I have half a mind to question if the individuals that thought it was a good idea to run an illegal hash extraction business out of a garage came in part because they looked up and saw that there was sprinkler systems and they went, oh, if our butane blows up, we have protection. And there is always an element built in that when you give human beings a safety net, they tend to push the boundaries. And so the unintended consequences of, well, my term of bubble wrapping the world and taking the risk out of it is people think less about the dangerous actions that they are doing. And I would much rather see citizens start to take it upon themselves to unplug their toasters, not make explosives in their basement, and not do illegal hash extraction in their houses than to require anybody building a house to build those things into them because someone might come along who's stupid enough to push the boundary.
Okay. So Miranda and Jennifer, I guess is the question for you guys. We are looking at possibly bringing this back on the 9th for another reading or the 23rd or 16th or whatever it was. given the number of changes you've heard from us, does that mean we should bring it back on the 9th to discuss those?
Yes, I think we'd still like the board to make a motion to set the public hearing date, since there's public noticing requirements for this. So yes, I would argue though, let's bring it back to both meetings, but hold that formal public hearing on the 16th.
On the 16th.
Just for clarification and for information for the Board of Trustees and the public on this, this is an ordinance that is adopting codes by reference. So this ordinance refers to all of these building codes, and then you have to look at the building codes to see what the town has adopted. So under state law, there's specific requirements for adopting codes by reference. You have to have an introduction of the ordinance and at a meeting, which this is the introduction of the ordinance. And then that same night, you set a public hearing for the passage of that ordinance. And there has to be a notice of the public hearing published 2 times in the paper, 15 days in advance and then 8 days in advance. So that's why we have the motion, a motion to set the public hearing. And the reason we're recommending coming back on November 16th is so that it can be approved with an effective date of January 1.
So we're adopting by reference, and so all of the suggestions made by Jonathan, and I'm not qualified to make solid recommendations here, but my inadequate recommendations, these would be provided as an addenda of some sort. We're taking these codes by reference. Oh, and plus we also require this.
Exactly. So these are, and in the ordinance, the way it's done is we've got, let's see, it's the first section, I think it's 18-1 is the adoption of the codes by reference. And then what we list following that is amendments to each of these codes.
So then it would strike me that it would be important for Jonathan and me, because I brought up some of this too, to suggest wording around what we mean by EV ready and what we mean by solar ready, or are those terms of art that you folks already understand?
I recommend, oh, sorry, go ahead, Jennifer.
Well, I was just going to say, and I'm sure you were going to say the same thing, Miranda, is that we would run this by Safe Built.
Okay.
You know, I'm sure they're familiar with terminology.
And yet I would think that someone like Jonathan would be able to provide some additional specifics regarding what he's thinking would comprise a solar ready and EV ready conduits. And so, but with all of that, you're thinking between Safe Built and you know you already have some expertise on the board in the form of Mayor Pro Tem Baumhover. You're feeling comfortable that you could write that text.
Would also like to extend an invite too. I mean, we would pull back together our building team, and so extending an invite if Mayor Pro Tem and Trustee Taylor you're able to join, that would be great as well.
Excellent, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't kind of throwing this over the wall to you.
That's appreciated. Yeah, I can definitely provide kind of a very by the book of this is what I mean, you know, this is what EV charger ready and solar panel ready looks like. And it's fairly simple. It's just conduits to those roof areas, to dedicated section in the breaker box, you know, making sure that the breaker box has both the room as well as conduits already run to it so that those breakers could be added in the future. I can write that up pretty easy. In terms of the fire suppression system, I would need to, I guess, work with the current building code group to kind of identify specific architectural details that make a home more likely to burn. That would take a little bit more work on my part. I guess the one thing I would want to comment on with that is when we're talking about the cost of certain buildings being built here, this board seemed to have a very, apologies, my dog's playing with a ball in the background, was a very distasteful view on a couple of the homes being built, particularly I think the Little Bear subdivision. And when I think of buildings like that, I find that very easy to incorporate an internal sprinkler system into. They're largely budget-based houses built as boxes with shared wet walls and literal architectural details to overcome. And as a town, the citizens tend to have a distaste for such buildings. And so when we talk about legislation, we tend to talk about things in isolation and in silos. And so when we talk about updating this building code, we should be trying to balance that and synthesize that with the overall character and goals of this town. We are fairly against developments that are built in a what folks might call a Breckenridge or, flatland style, in which it is largely a box with pitched enough roofs to meet our snow loads, but lacking other architectural details. And we are more prone to enjoy and appreciate buildings that are built with a lot of modern architecture, character, and uniqueness. And the more that you require in building codes, the more contractors and the folks building them are going to try to cut costs. And the easiest way to cut costs is to leave out those architectural details that I have heard in my time on this board, folks tend to think make this town unique. So I just kind of would like to speak to the unintended consequences that may result in not thinking this through in context of all of the other goals we have as a town.
Okay. And is this something you guys feel confident we can bring back to discuss on the 9th of November?
Yeah, I believe so.
In that case, I think all that really remains this evening is for someone to make the motion to set the public hearing.
I will read the script.
Wait, I just want to add one thing.
Go ahead.
I found a spot that Ron is talking about if you want to take note of the page.
Oh, yeah.
Because that is a little something it might be worth discussing also. It's the page 135 of 274 on our package here. And it's section 2. Wait, now my thing's not moving. It's section 2 where it talks about definitions of the sleeping room, section R202. And for easy reference, it's on page 135 of this packet. Anyway, there was a whole bit about it has to comply with the minimum room dimension of the IRC, section R304 and R305. And then, so I don't know if we want to discuss that in November also.
And, that's one of those adoption by reference. So
Yeah, and I'd just like to verify that it is actually what Ron is describing. I mean, right. I did look those up, and I thought that it's actually been changed in the IRC to say that what Ron was talking about is not actually required anymore. But I could be wrong on that. So it would be nice to pull up those sections and just look at them and make sure that.
Yeah, can we flag that for a discussion on the 9th?
Yes.
So we can actually bring forth the language from the IRC.
Yes.
We're all looking at the same thing. Okay. Thanks, Tanya, for finding that. I was searching on 70 square feet and bedrooms and all this and wasn't finding the right keyword to search on.
It's hard.
One other Can I just mention something really quick that I wanted to flag? Billy Giblin mentioned something about the sewer depth.
The
And
frost line depth.
Yes, and I wanted to let you know that that is an issue that that we're going to address with Chris Pelletier. He was gone as we were putting this ordinance together, and so we'll verify that with him.
If I could just jump in there, just a little bit of background on why we have the 48 inches depth up here. It has a lot to do with our soil and soil engineers' responses and kind of expertise. We tend to deal with a lot of what's you would call decomposing granite up here. And that decomposing granite generally goes down to a depth of anywhere from 48 to actually 6 feet. And if this Board of Trustees remember, last year we had the freeze up on Big Springs of our main water line, the main water line on Big Springs. And it was actually buried at a depth of below 48 inches, but had been backfilled with basically the existing material that they had trenched that trench out with, which was decomposed granite, which fundamentally doesn't actually have any insulation properties. It's basically just a bunch of crushed rock.
Interesting.
So a lot of the
Interesting.
reason we have that depth for our footers and our sewer lines has everything to do with
Get
the
below the
composition of our soils and less so to do with how deep the freeze actually goes. The freeze will only actually go 24 to 30 inches in town in areas where you're in aspen groves and actually have sufficient topsoil. But on our steep hillsides, such as Navajo, Caribou, Big Springs, you are generally digging into decomposed granite that has little to no insulation properties as soil. And so the deeper you go, the more you are able to overcome how deep the freeze can come through that. So I would actually like to see that depth kept. If we want to amend it, then we should amend it based upon the soil engineer's specifications, and it's already within the code that you have to have a soil engineer come out to assess your slope, assess your soils, and tell you how much load you can put on that slope and on those soils.
Yeah, it's a good point. And you said this is something that you guys are gonna be working with Chris on over the next couple weeks prior to the next round?
Yes,
Jennifer?
we will. Yes.
Okay. Let's keep that in mind, and maybe we have some notes from our previous adoption, or get a soil engineer's opinion. Okay. Any other thoughts or comments? Julian, over to you.
Following the introduction of Ordinance 823 this evening, I move to place Ordinance 823 on the November 16th agenda as an action item with a public hearing.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Motion from Trustee Taylor, second from Trustee Coombs Ismail. Macy?
Mayor Larson,
Yes.
Trustee Coombs Ismail,
Yes.
Trustee Danforth,
Yes.
Trustee Taylor,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baumhover,
A begrudging yes.
Trustee Corvallin,
Yes.
and Trustee Apt.
Yes.
All right. We will have it as an action on the 16th, but we'll be bringing it back for further discussion the week before that. All right. Thank you all. Next up, we are looking at the budget. I believe I saw Rita on video. Ready to
Yes.
take this away. Welcome.
Yes. Good evening, Mayor, trustees, members of the public. I'll be presenting the 2022 draft budget to you this evening. Meeting objectives are as follows. We'll first talk about the 5-year tax revenue trend. We'll review fund balances and reserve funds. We'll discuss the revenue and expenditures by fund and the capital improvement priorities. We'll have an open session in case you have any questions or feedback, and then we'll talk about the process and what the next steps are. Can you go to the next slide, please, Miranda? One more. Thank you. We have received one extra month of sales tax revenue since our last meeting. We are now trending at 18% above where we were at last year. Based on year-to-date 2021 sales tax actuals, staff is conservatively projecting that 2022 tax revenue will surpass the 2020 actuals by 6%. Therefore, staff is recommending an increase in sales tax revenue of 6% over the 2020 actuals for the 2022 budget. If tax revenue surpasses expectations, staff is recommending the establishment of a designated CIP fund. As you will see when we get into the different budgets, CIP are currently being paid through the operating budget. There's a couple ways we could go about this potential creation of a capital improvement project fund. We could use 5% of additional sales tax revenue over 2020 actuals to set up a fund in 2022, or establishing a CIP fund in 2021 from excess revenue. Next slide. The property tax revenue for 2022 is estimated at $614,845. That's an increase of $102,000 or 19.9% when compared to the 2021 property taxes. Next. I would like to talk about the two different types of funds we have in town. We have the government funds, which is your general fund, community center fund, and non-major funds that are principally supported by taxes and intergovernmental revenues. Non-major funds include the Conservation Trust Fund and the Street Fund. The general fund balances include funds that are reserved as follows: $110,000 from BCHA for Tungsten Village development in lieu of dedication of land for public use, $36,500 from the parking lease with Eldora, which was approved by the BOT so funds could be raised to be used for park improvements. Just as a reminder, as staff, we aren't going to use those funds without coming to you first, or if there is something you all would like to see those dollar amounts go for. Next. Next, we have the proprietary funds. The town of Nederland maintains two proprietary funds, which are the water and sewer funds. They are financed and operated in a manner similar to private business enterprises. They are not your typical government funded by taxes type of programs and services. The idea is to pay for services provided through fees, which hasn't happened really, and we are having to use tax dollars and also have had substantial amount of grants as well as $0 loans. The net positions for the sewer and water fund include reserves as follows. We have $250,000 for sewer infrastructure and improvements and expansion, and $635,000 for water infrastructure improvements and expansions. We have separate bank accounts for these reserve funds, and I will go into more detail on how these reserves come about when we discuss the sewer and water fund budget. Next slide. Before we get started with the general fund budget, I just wanted to explain a few things about the spreadsheet. You will see an approximate 6% increase in operating budget across the board. For salaries, we budgeted 2% for cost of living adjustment and up to 4% for merit increases. It is very important to look at the 2020 actuals when reviewing these spreadsheets. You'll see highlighted in green the changes in net assets for the 2020 budgeted and 2020 actuals column, and the 2022 change in net assets is highlighted in yellow. Capital improvements are highlighted in blue. You'll see these throughout all the funds. In 2020, the town budgeted a decrease in the general fund balance of $60,490. The actuals show an increase of $229,196, which is a total increase of $290,000. And I want to say this again, what an amazing accomplishment that was during a pandemic year. The general fund is operating in the black in 2022, and we are projecting an increase of $41,478. The $62,481 capital expenditures, which are highlighted in blue, includes $31,571 for the plow payment, $10,910 for the PD vehicle lease, $10,000 for body cameras and tasers, and $10,000 for an electric vehicle for public works. And that will be shared with the streets fund, and they will be contributing $30,000. A couple of other capital improvements priorities that are listed under a separate account is $22,500 for the master infrastructure plan and $26,000 for the old shelf well construction. You're going to see all these capital improvement priorities listed under separate slides as well. Next. Next is our community center fund. We are operating in the black, and we are projecting an increase of $8,209 for the 2022 budget. As discussed during our previous budget sessions, we decided to postpone the stone garage project until 2023. Therefore, you are not seeing any capital improvements for the community center. Next slide. Let's see. That is the water fund. We are operating in the black. For the water fund, we are projecting an increase of $13,483. We do have capital improvements of $263,000, and even with those, we are operating in the black. Included in the $263,000 capital improvements is $144,000 for raw water pond repairs, $100,000 for caribou generator, $15,000 for hydrant replacements, and $4,000 for turbidimeter replacement. So I did want to talk a little bit about the PIF fees that I was talking about earlier that go into the reserve funds. So anything above budgeted PIF fees get put into the reserve account. So if we look at under other sources of cash, under the 2020 budgeted column, we've had budgeted for 2020 $37,000 in PIF fees, and actuals came in at $197,150, which is an increase of $160,000, which then that's what was put into the reserves this year for the 2020 budget. And just, I also, for example, let's see, I wanted to also talk about the 2021 PIF fees. We have budgeted at $74,000. And as you will see later in my September financials, right now, as of September, we are at $125,800 already in PIF fees. So $51,000 above budgeted for 2021. Next slide. So for the sewer fund, looking at the operating budget, we are operating in the black at $61,000. Once we add the other sources of cash in the amount of $382,900 and other expenditures for debt service and capital improvements, we end up in a decrease in fund balance of $97,010. Capital improvements for $245,000 includes $180,000 for grit removal, $5,000 for manhole repairs, $50,000 for I&I repairs, and $10,000 for security locks at the wastewater plant. Another CIP project is the grease interceptor policy, which again is located under separate account. We are prepared to use reserve funds to balance the budget if our 2022 actuals actually do in fact show a decrease in fund balance. And again, just like in the water fund, anything above PIF fees, budgeted PIF fees, will end up in that reserve account that I had mentioned before. Next. The street fund has a very healthy fund balance since they have not used it all. That money has, since they haven't used all the money that has come in every year. In 2022, the street fund is planning on using $7,021 more than they'll be bringing in, and they plan on pulling that from their fund balance that wasn't used last year if need be. If you look at the 2020 financials, we were budgeting a decrease of $13,303 and ended up with an actual fund balance of $48,700, an increase in fund balance of $48,764. Capital expenses of $50,000 includes that $30,000 for the electric vehicle, which is being shared with Public Works, and $20,000 to resurface the school road. Next. The Conservation Trust Fund is very regulated on how we can spend the funds. These funds have to be used for park and trails improvements and maintenance. We did increase expenditures for 2022 to include unused fund balances from 2020. Next. In the Health and Human Services Fund, we are projecting revenue from lodging and occupation tax for $10,000. And we are splitting that 90% going to health and human services expenditures and 10% towards law enforcement expenditures. Next, please. I'll go ahead again and introduce the DDA's budget. And I did see that some staff is here in case you do have any additional questions for them. The DDA has two different funding sources. They have the mill levy funds that come in at around $33,000 a year, and that's what they use for their operating budget. For example, to pay for staff, legal, etc. The DDA's operating budget is similar to last year. Then they also have the TIF funds, and that's the tax incremental funds. That's what they use for their capital project programs. The capital improvements, which are highlighted in blue for $515,482, look like a lot. And the reality, though, is when looking at the 2020 budgeted amount of over $500,000, the actual amount spent was $231,646. Looking at the 2020 budgeted change in net assets, which is highlighted in green, it shows a decrease of $229,500. When looking at the actuals, however, you'll see an increase of $349,880, an overall increase of $579,000. Just because you might approve this budget, the process hasn't changed. They would still come before you with any TIF projects and present it as an informational item and explain to you what they are hoping to accomplish with the TIF funds. Next, they would bring a resolution to you and you would then approve it. The DDA is projecting to use $515,482 for TIF projects in 2022. $25,000 for beautification, $150,000 for wayfinding, $265,000 for Big Springs parking, $30,000 for the Nederland Fire Protection Department, $10,000 for event support, $10,000 for public art master plan and projects, and $20,000 for traffic safety support. And the $5,402 is remaining from a resolution for website from 2020. Next slide. So really the next 3 slides are a recap of the capital improvement priorities that I discussed during each individual budget. Miranda, did you want to talk about the annex building before we take questions and feedback?
Yeah, so when it comes to the annex building, I'm still working with contractors as well as industrial hygienists to get that estimate. And then the goal would be to bring that back before the board to assess kind of that rebuild versus demolish conversation. For the time being, Cynthia Baki, who works out of that building, is working remotely and then also shares offices with people in town hall as needed. So while it is a desire to address this, it's not an immediate need. We are able to work through it. So more to come about the plan for that annexation and what the cost would be for kind of both avenues.
Okay, should we do questions and feedback, Miranda, before we go to the proposed staffing budget?
Yeah, Mayor Larson, we are kind of looking to combine this discussion item with the next because they tie together.
I was going to say they're linked rather closely.
We'd love to do questions just on the budget as it stands right now before we jump into the staff.
Yeah, I think that makes very good sense. So yeah, thank you. Thanks, Rita, for that, the presentation on the budget. And, you know, something you said early on, I just want to reiterate is I want to thank the incredible work of everyone in the town staff this year to have, put together a year where we've done well, given all the challenges faced by the town. That was just absolutely incredible. And it makes our job so much easier when we start to plan for a budget next year to be working from that position. So, yeah, so I will just throw this open to trustees for questions on budget, and we'll start with Julian this time.
I've stared at this for a very long time, and at this point, I have no questions. Rita, excellent work. Thank you.
Agreed. Eric, how about you?
No questions, just happy that we're coming at this from such a strong position, and I hope we can leverage that to make improvements for the town and improvements in our staffing.
All right. Alan?
No questions.
Okay. Tanya?
What would be some projects you would anticipate in the capital improvement fund for? Just out of curiosity, like your first things that ideally you guys would use that for. Hello?
I think you were breaking up. Can you repeat the question for me, please?
Oh, yeah.
I think.
Go ahead. Do you hear me? My question was, with the capital improvement fund, what would be the projects, what would be the first projects that you would want to use that money for? What sort of examples would that fund be utilized to?
Yeah, I'd love to have Chris Pelletier jump in. Obviously, infrastructure is going to be a large component to that, but I know this has been something Chris has been looking for a while. So Chris, in addition to what we've already outlined in the PowerPoint, do you have other thoughts?
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, I don't really have any off the top of my head that I'm thinking about, but it'd be nice to have a fund available to draw from for things like repaving School Road and those types of infrastructure projects that are necessary. So nothing really off the top of my head.
But it would contain everything that's sort of like that's in our capital improvement plan or master improvement plan would all be the items that become the list that can be funded out of the capital improvement plan, but at kind of the recommendation of town staff and with the involvement of the town board in the planning process of which of those to tackle in the whatever order.
So these would be things like relining our, water plant and our, I&I treatment of our sewer facilities and continuing dust control on 3rd, 5th, Big Springs, Old Town to help keep the dust down for the neighborhoods when they are used as throughways by our folks who come to town to service our restaurants and our tourist facilities that could be used for improvements to roads, maybe rerouting certain roads, traffic studies, plans along those lines. That's, I guess, what my mind jumps to when I hear of a capital improvement fund. And I think it's a brilliant idea because so often we're pulling that from the streets funds or other funds and justifying it. So I think when we look at our capital improvement and we look at the Raftelis report, as well as we look at kind of our infrastructure needs going forward for the next 10 to 20 years, it's become apparent that we need to start stockpiling some money to address certain issues that for whatever reason or another have we've not been able to address in our budget constraints or have been able to function as a town without directly having to address that currently we're kind of coming up to a place where we need to have some funds stockpiled in order to match grants and continue to look for grants and DOLA funding.
Does that answer your question, Tanya?
Yes, thank you.
About you, Lindsay? Any questions?
Not at the moment.
All right. Jonathan, I mean, you chimed in there, but do you have any questions about the budget?
No questions. I guess just a couple comments on the Big Springs parking for the DDA budget. That is specifically might come across as a high number to certain members of this board and was discussed among the DDA. The kind of idea behind that is the unknowns right now with the supply chain, as well as the drastic increase in the cost of construction over this past year and the past few years alone, that we wanted to make sure that there was enough allocated in the budget to deal with any potential contingencies without directly putting in the contingency, with the knowledge that any of those funds that aren't used just gets put right back into the budget. So when we're looking at that, understanding that it was specifically placed as a high number, and that same thing is to be said for the wayfinding project, that those two were basically taken as the highest potential of the range for these projects for the DDA, so that no additional approval and resolution would be needed from the BOT, and the hope would be that those projects would come in far under that budget and that money could then be reallocated into the DDA budget to be used for other projects.
Right. Should we, next up is the staffing questions or discussion? Or how did you want to transition this?
If you don't mind, do you want to do public comment on kind of it all, or would you like to take public comment on just the budget?
Yeah, we could do it. We could break it up. So we do have it in the agenda as two separate things. So yeah, let's break it up here and start. Excuse me. If any members of the public like to speak on the budget as opposed to the staffing proposals, and the staffing, but yeah, staffing proposals, now would be your chance. And Kathleen, your hand's been up this whole meeting, so I don't know if that's a new one or an old one.
Ron Mitchell.
Ron, go for it. 3 minutes are yours.
On the DDA budget, I feel that we may not actually be on the high end of the spectrum for the projects that are open-ended. So we have intentionally kind of minimized our budget because we may have to come back with some revisions. And so I wanted you to be aware of that, that we've basically voted to impound the funds because of this and take this year to complete the projects that are in the hopper, and then look at forward throughout this year for new projects that are significant.
All right. Thanks for that clarification. Anyone else? Yep, Kathleen, I see your hand up.
Kathleen had submitted a comment, but it's more specific to the new positions. Oh, Mayor Larson, you're on mute.
Yep. We'll take public comment on the staffing positions in the next round. So this is specifically about the budget. And so we'll save your comment and come back to that, Kathleen. All right. I think then we are ready for the staffing discussion.
So at the 2 work sessions that we had talked with the Board of Trustees about some recommended new positions that had been asked to bring forth for 2022. Those positions were the Boulder County co-responder, a grants manager, a parks manager, and a sustainability coordinator. At the second work session, the board had asked that we come back and talk with the department and division heads to get their feedback. We had a really robust discussion during our department head meeting on October 7th and are offering the following recommendation. We are recommending considering hiring a parks manager to oversee a parks department at a salary range of $45,000 to $55,000 depending on experience. We also recommend increasing the match for the sustainability coordinator to $15,000 for a total of $30,000 for the position, because Boulder County would do a match of $15,000. We recommend budgeting $30,000 for grant writing services that would allow town staff to contract with a grant writer for larger grants following Board of Trustee approval. And at this time, we recommend just continuing to talk with the Boulder County Sheriff's Office and pursue grants to fund a co-responder. At the work session, the board did talk about combining a sustainability coordinator and a grants writer. We do not feel that that's appropriate, mainly because of the concern I had mentioned in the work session of competing priorities and grants not getting the focus that they truly need, which is kind of a situation a lot of us fall into if it's not dedicated. We also are unsure if that sustainability coordinator would really be able to assist with grants that are really outside their purview, and making sure that the right parties handle those grants. There was a discussion about hiring a grants manager as part-time. It is pretty challenging to hire part-time staff just because most are looking for benefited positions. So that's why we feel contracting with one would be more appropriate. It should be noted too that if there was a match, even with the increase in the match for the sustainability coordinator, Garrett McDaniel does need to secure a full-time benefited position. So he likely would not continue in that role post the end of his current contract, which is February 2022. Depending on if the board agrees with town staff recommendations, some things that we would do from here is present the parks manager job description. We would continue to talk with Ned Rink and Mountain Tennis and Pickleball about taking over those facilities as town assets under this park manager. We would talk with Boulder County about increasing our match, develop a proposal for a grant writer, do a request for proposals so we could have a grant writer on record with us, and then keep working on securing grants for Boulder County co-responder. In the packet, we did attach a budget that shows how adding the park manager and sustainability coordinator and the grants writer, these 3 pieces, how it would affect the budget. I want to draw attention to the fact that it would cause a change from an increase in change in net assets of $41,000 to a decrease in change in net assets of $71,000 for an overall change of approximately $112,000. Again, as Rita noted, Often we are budgeting in as that decrease, and so we don't want that to be a deterrent, but something for the board to take into consideration. One thing that's not in this aim is that we also, in looking at that professional services bucket, we would recommend that the Board of Trustees maybe also consider increasing Attorney Madsen's legal line item. Currently, it's at $57,000. We did historically a $2,000 increase. The thought was to increase that to $60,000 since she is attending meetings and very involved in the ordinance writing that we've done, the code updates, that slight increase could be beneficial. So it's not in here. It's something I wanted to throw your way for consideration. So ultimately, the question before you is, how do you feel about this proposal? Are you interested in moving forward with anything we recommended? If so, depending on what you are interested in, we would integrate that into the budget that would be released on October 25th, that draft budget, and a part of the first hearing we would have in November.
Awesome. Well, thank you for, sort of taking what you heard at the work sessions and from everyone and coming up with something that kind of tries to do as much as possible with what we've got.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I think this is, I mean, I look at this and it's a big step forward for us to be hiring, hiring new positions, and to try to do that right now is I think a good thing for us. So, but throw this out here and we can begin this time with Lindsay. What's your take on the proposal from town staff for these 3 positions, but also continuing to negotiate with the county on the co-responder, so 3.5?
Yeah, I think that's really great. I think having the county work with us is a good idea, and so I'm all for this.
Okay, Eric?
I'm happy enough with this. I'm wondering, in terms of a contracted grant writer, if you're anticipating that somebody would need to be put on retainer for such a position, or would they work? Would we basically work for pay?
So I think they would work for pay, but the thought is to be able to secure someone so that we already had an agreement in place and we knew the way in which they charged. The same way in which we approach like legal. We know exactly what that invoice, the amount, the hourly rate there. And I think that's the benefit of having kind of someone on record, is we know who do we work with and what the cost is.
And so were you, I guess I should have been more direct and just asked, is $30,000 a retainer for a grant writer, or is it the total budget for grant writing and the retainer would be smaller?
So it's the total budget for the grant writer. The grant writers I've been working with as of late haven't required a retainer. Okay. And so this is just them. So I guess that would be the request for proposal would be, this is what we have, this is the hourly rate. And of course, like when we reach that threshold, we wouldn't be able to use them, or we talk with the board. My other recommendation is that if we were to contract with a grant writer, that any grant we chose to do so would be at the Board of Trustees directive.
Right. So it would be allocated, not committed.
Right.
Great. That's I just wanted to make sure that was absolutely clear, that was the proposal.
Yep.
Yeah. The rest makes a lot of sense to me.
Okay. How about you, Alan?
Overall, I think it looks pretty good. I hope we can hang on to Garrett McDaniel. He's done a great job as a sustainability coordinator, and getting him up to 30,000, I think, is a very wise investment. And I do think having a grant writer makes a lot of sense. I guess I'm still skeptical about parks manager. I understand the motivation in trying to integrate things. I just don't, I guess and having even talked to people, I don't think we have the assets that, justify that position. I'd rather see more money going toward grant writing. But, I'm open to hearing other people's comments about that. But overall, I think it's a good staff proposal.
Tanya?
Yeah, I guess in response to Alan about not having the assets, I kind of agree we don't have assets, but I think the hope would be that a parks manager would help create some of these assets. Like maybe like we're talking about the rink is an asset that's kind of underused, and maybe with more direction it could get used more. But maybe they could help us, get a performance space that we've talked about so much built into the parks, or get the parks where they need to be. I mean, everything's on volunteers with ProSab, just like with the sustainability board. You guys couldn't do everything you wanted to do, so you hired a sustainability coordinator because volunteers can only do so much. And I think that's kind of where we're at with the recreational aspects of Nederland, which I feel like are really behind towns of our size. And if we hired somebody, my hope would be we would improve the recreation in this town. Just because it wouldn't just be volunteers trying to do everything. So I'm definitely for a parks manager, like big time. I'm just a little confused. Can we afford this? Did it sound like we were going to be 70,000 in debt if we do this? I was a little confused on the budget.
I'm gonna talk about that. So yes, so what it was, the original budget, we were gonna show an increase of 41,000, and with having these 3 positions added, it would show a decrease of $71,000. However, again, I want to point out we budgeted in 2020 a decrease of $60,000, but actually came ahead $229,000. So I want you to keep that in mind. That's what was added to the fund balance in 2020. So we are, yes, with the budget of 2022, we would be budgeting a decrease of 71,000, but we would be using money from the fund balance to cover that.
Okay, so we can't afford it. It would just,
yes, ma'am.
It would be something if the economy crashed and all of a sudden we're not getting any more sales tax, then possibly
yes.
we have to terminate positions, but that would be terrible. Okay.
Yes.
Well, I'm all for doing what you guys suggest with the grant writing. I mean, the hope is she'll pay for herself, or they'll pay for themselves, and and the parks could potentially generate revenue too if people rent spaces more and put more money into our recreation. So sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Julian.
Yeah, this looks very good. I am probably one of the people here who's thinking, the parks manager, I see that as kind of an experiment, but I think it could prove to be extremely useful. And so I see that as a bit of a risk, but I understand the reasoning behind it, and I'm ready to take that risk. As to the grant writer, I'm really pleased that we're kind of renting a grant writer to start with, because that means we don't have to lay anybody off if it turns out not to work. But if it does work, and this individual is paying for himself, then then we can consider actually hiring someone full time. If it doesn't work out, that's $30,000. That's a $30,000 lesson we learned. So yeah, that looks very good. I've got no questions and no problems with this.
All right. And Jonathan.
Happy, I guess, with what I'm seeing. I guess I'm gonna always defend the parks manager here and kind of speak to that. While as a municipality and as a town, we may not have assets, I believe that a lot of the issues that has always stemmed from recreation is the siloed effect of the recreational infrastructure that we have in the peak-to-peak community, and particularly as this town. We have 2 ball fields, one at the elementary school, one at the high school, with still a potential option of being creative and incorporating another one at Gershio Ball Field again. We have a skate park that is multi-million-dollar skate park. We have a multi-million-dollar Olympic-sized rink. We have, I believe, last I checked, 18 pocket parks. and one main park, Chipeta Park. So as a town, while we only own Chipeta Park and Gershio, or the Gateway Park, we have a number of assets that are currently siloed and run by nonprofits. And the flow of communication between those nonprofits and the town of Nederland has always been, I guess, siloed at best. And there's not an open flow of communication. And so while I can hear that we may not have all that many direct assets as a town, I believe that paying for a parks manager will greatly help bring together all the various recreational infrastructure that we have and all the potential opportunity into a more cohesive vision for the town of Nederland. As a town, we currently lack any little league programs. We lack any intramural sport programs. We lack a lot of these things. And one of the biggest benefits of recreation and leisure, as it has always stood since its kind of impetus in the early 1900s, has been the ability to build community. And in a town that is struggling with so many different viewpoints and often finds itself at odds with its own citizens, I can think of no better way to build community than to help build up programs and opportunities for families and community members to interact in a fun and lighthearted setting. Though this parks manager can do everything from helping to ease the burden on town administrators and town clerks for negotiating contracts with Frozen Dead Guy Days, NedFex, High Peak Art Fairs, to working with the community center staff to help further market the programs that are happening out of the community center, to continue to develop the rink and the tennis courts and add in intramural sports programs, as well as youth programming beyond the peak to peak soccer, which has always been housed by Teens Inc. And I think that between the current agreements we have with the schools for use of their parking and different things, we can find creative ways to create intramural sports programs for both our youth as well as our adults. And fundamentally, when it comes to having a community, I think we lack opportunities as a community to come together in fun and creative ways and to have events. We've lost a lot of our festivals during the pandemic, but before that, we've lost a lot of them simply because it is hard for nonprofits and volunteers to continue to keep these things going year after year, especially as age and life kind of circumstances pull away some of their driving forces and their driving heads that have kind of kept everything running. And so to have a staff member in town that can start to get to know the ins and outs of these programs and work with the nonprofits that currently house these facilities as well as these events, we have an opportunity as a town to start to create some continuity in our town events, our town festivals, and potentially to build huge opportunities for the community to be able to interact in very positive and healthy ways. So I don't think that the parks manager is as much of an experiment as folks may perceive. And as far back as 2008, you had the head of the federal Parks and Recreation basically saying that the future of the wildland urban interface is a recreation based economy. For the longest time in the town of Nederland, we have called ourselves a tourist town, but largely folks come up to the town of Nederland to utilize our biking trails or to enjoy the scenery and all the recreational opportunities around us. And as a town, we have not been capitalizing on the potential benefits to both of our revenue as well as to our social capital as a community by building strong and concrete programs around our recreational opportunities. So I believe and would encourage everybody to really think about the long-lasting benefits of kind of creating a center, a center for all of these siloed ventures that have been going on to address our recreational opportunities. And I think this is maybe one of the most positive positions that we have actually talked about hiring in the last 3 to 4 years.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan. Let's open this up to public comment because we know there is one. Miranda, you want to start us off?
Yes. Kathleen Chibai, 30-year East Magnolia resident, 18-year business owner. I don't think that BOT should be voting on, let alone passing the addition of any new positions for 2022, since the positions don't have actual job descriptions. How can the proposed new salaries be given when there is no job description? Shouldn't the town first provide a list of duties, its wants, needs, and then propose the salary to be based on needs proposed? This looks more like a cart in front of the horse. According to the BOT packet, the town won't have a job description for a parks manager until November 9th. BOT meeting, but the proposed salary is $45,000 to $55,000 a year. And I noticed much of the language provided in the packet from other communities does not apply in Nederland. Why does Nederland actually need what does that Nederland actually need from in a parks manager? Per the sustainability coordinator, is there a review of what the current sustainability coordinator has accomplished and how much money they were paid for what they did versus what can be accomplished if they get the $15,000? For creating and hiring a salaried grant writer at this time, unnecessary. And for a town that embraces sustainability like it does, there is nothing sustainable about relying on grants.
Okay. Any other members of the public like to weigh in on the proposed? Danette, I see your hand come up.
Hi, everyone. I'm Danette Reilly. I'm the rank treasurer, and we've been working closely with Miranda and the ProSab board to talk about this parks manager position. We support it. We believe that the rink is a tremendous asset for the town of Nederland. And because it's run on volunteers, these volunteers get burnt out by the end of our very short season. We also support the grants manager, the grant writer position, because we are looking to do improvements for a second phase of a GoCo grant at the park. The parks manager, talking about job description, would be hands-on at the rink. There is the asset of the Zamboni there that they would need to maintain and run and resurface the ice. And then there's the entire office position to collect the fees, to collect the waivers. Whether or not that's the parks manager position, that would be something that they would be overseeing. So during the months that we are open from December to the end of February, those are critical pieces in the parks manager position. So we very much support the creation of this, because sustainability for the rink cannot just depend on volunteers, like Tanya was saying. It needs to be something more. And I think that the rink is a tremendous asset that you don't want to lose. And I think the partnering with the town to get the word out about it also, I think even people that live in Nederland don't even know it exists. So I think that would be beneficial too.
Thank you, Danette. Anyone else? Not seeing or hearing anyone else. Bring it back to the board. I guess Rita and Miranda, did you guys hear what you were looking to hear from us tonight? It sounded like fairly strong agreement from the board.
Yeah, I think we're good. I guess the one thing I just wanted to plug back in there is the legal. If the board has a desire to increase legal by 3,000 to 60. And I apologize for throwing that in last minute, but just would love your take on that.
Mhm. Well, as I, come down to town hall every 2 weeks to sign checks and all, I think, it's either we budget 60 now or we do a supplemental budget mid-year next year to probably increase and pay her more anyway. So we seem to spend the legal we say overspend the legal we have every year budgeted. So I would say increasing it to 60 makes good sense because we do have a sort of a standard increase every year. And yeah, but that's my view from where I've stood on the years of doing this. Other trustees?
And maybe some context. So 60 would obviously allow us $5,000 per month. We try to, as much as possible, run legal through an escrow account that people would have paid for their planning and zoning applications. But her invoices do average somewhere between 4,500 to 5,000 for just the kind of administrative pieces that we don't pass through. So I do think there's benefit in just kind of doing that increase to 60 so that we have that 5, with the goal, of course, of being mindful of her time and not reaching that every month, but it would give us that cushion to when we do, it's not kind of like panic mode, what happens next month.
Can I ask, are we indeed historically year on year supplementing the legal budget? Is that what's going on?
Rita?
I would have to look that up.
Because
I
I mean, just because I don't want to increase something that
Right.
isn't actually being met
Sure.
every, I understand the kind of monthly consideration, but if we're not actually exceeding 57,000 or whatever it might be year on year, then it seems unnecessary to increase it. I mean, it's I know that it sounds a little nickel and dimey on from 57 to 60, but just I don't necessarily think that flexibility there is exactly what we want. I think what we want is just to be absolutely as efficient as possible with the use of our attorneys. So we're not having to supplement that budget year on year. I don't think we should increase it. But if we are, then it would be logical to do so.
Yeah, and I could look that up for you. I do know that as of September, we are at $45,000. So we have 3 months left. That would put us at 60. So that's just, for informational purposes. So yes, we would be obviously 3,000 above if that were the case.
But if this year is an outlier, in the kind of year
Right.
on year looking at it, then yeah.
Right. I could look that up and get with you on that to see where we were at the last few years, if we were above budget or not.
Yeah, I think, and one, I guess, piece that, I would say this year, we are a bit more mindful of her time. Historically, we never did regular kind of one-on-ones, and now we do them weekly. And the purpose of that is to use that time to talk about everything versus the one-off emails that, of course, cost extra. So I think that there is great mindful use of her time. But yeah, I think what we could do is come. So Rita, do you want to leave it at 57 and then have a further discussion on the 9th about what that would look like? Because I realize, or how do you want to handle that for publishing the draft?
Right. How about if I were to look at it tomorrow and see where we're at with that, and I could send out a quick email to the board and let them know the past 3, 4, 5 years, this is where we're at, and get feedback and decide before Friday, because I'd like to obviously have my budget ready to be posted here by the end of Friday, have some good figures. If I could get feedback from the board, letting me know if we should stay at 57 or go to 60. That would be something I could do.
Is that Mayor Larson? And
sounds like a good plan to me. Yeah. I mean, okay. I think that meets both ours. Other trustees?
That'll be the plan then.
I think that'll be a plan then.
Right.
Great. Is there more than we have? I'm just looking at the clock here. Is there more on this discussion item this evening, or are we done with the budget and staff discussion?
We are done for now.
Okay. Well, we have 12 minutes to get through all the staff and trustee reports. Go ahead, Brenda. Kick us
I'm
off.
happy to do what we've historically done, and maybe just call for our team to see. Obviously, all of our reports are in the packet, but I'd love to open it up to any member of the department heads if they want to share. All of my stuff is in the packet. I think the two big things I want to highlight is the IGA. Originally, we were not hearing from Boulder County. Happy to report that they have reached out, and Trustee Coombs, Ismail, and Trustee Taylor and I are trying to secure a time in November to meet. And then also the fire department is embarking on their fire chief search, and they have asked me to represent town staff in that collaboration in those interviews. And so I'll be a part of that. But Don, Rita, Chris, Larry, do any of you have any urgent items you want to throw out from your staff report?
Nothing urgent, just happy to report that in September, every fund is showing an increase in fund balance. I'm just amazed. So that's good news. Yes, yes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I reported in the staff report that there will be flu shots on Thursday, and the county was not able to provide those. So there will only be COVID vaccine at the clinic Thursday.
Okay, thanks, Don. Larry,
or
anything from you?
Nothing specific from PD. Things have just kind of slowed down a little bit for us, and everything's in the packet if anybody has any questions. Thanks.
Chris, you're the last one.
You know, I've been on vacation all month, so I haven't been doing much this month, but I will piggyback on this discussion about adding more staff, which is what I hear more and more is that we're not paying enough of our staff coming in, and it's hard to keep people employed. So just want to put that thought out there that we're not very competitive in the market right now, and for adding more employees and not really able to keep the employees we have, that could be a problem.
So I'll just add the comment on that. So we are kind of full steam ahead on that the compensation study, and the hope is actually to bring that to the Board of Trustees early spring, so that there's plenty of time to assess pay and then possibly make adjustments prior to even jumping into the 2023 budget. So I'm anticipating about 6 months, and you'll have that compensation information as well as the pay scale recommended plan that we had talked about at the budget meeting.
Yeah, understood. And I'm really just talking about the lower end workers where it's just pretty competitive out there. I just have to look to my neighbors to know that they're paying more than the town Nederland. And at one time, $19 was sufficient. And now $20 is enough, and people were asking for 21, 22, and that's really not where our starting wages are. And it's just hard to actually keep people here motivated to work when they can go next door and find work elsewhere. So something for the board to consider.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that compensation study that we talked about and tackling sort of the next generation of the living wage. Anything else from staff? Anything you want to highlight? Questions for staff on anything we've read in the packet? All right. We can do a quick round here of trustee reports. You know, a lot of us said we were doing oral reports, so we'll make those quick. I've been working on a ton of things. They're slowly fermenting and will hopefully come and be ready for a report here in the next couple months, but lots of meetings without any real outcome. One thing I do want to update everyone on is the redistricting that has happened at the state and federal level. And we are staying, as of right now, unless barring Supreme Court challenges, staying in Congressman Magoo's district, congressional, staying with our Judy Amibile as our House representative, but we have been drawn out of the rest of Boulder County's state Senate district. We had been under Steve Fenberg in that state Senate district, and we've been now drawn into a district with much of Larimer County, and so the population center being Loveland. And that's been a pretty significant change for us in terms of our state Senate representation, and this would all take effect after the next election in 2022. So one change, but two remain the same. And kind of interesting to be split off from Boulder County on that front of things. But Jonathan, did you have anything you wanted to hit on the verbal report here?
Yeah, just real quickly. The DDA's public art survey, I think, is still taking some surveys. They are asking for feedback regarding the wayfinding, both from staff, community members, as well as other board members. And the DDA currently has a vacancy on the board. So if any members of the public who are business owners or part of the Nederland Downtown Development Authority within the district and are interested in joining that board, we are still accepting applications through tomorrow, I believe, is the cutoff line. So beyond that, the projects continue to move forward. The Big Springs parking is kind of a little bit in a standstill until the private business owner, that being Tebow, has kind of pulled permits, and that process is being slightly slowed down through the intricacies of working in a public-private relationship. But beyond that, that's about the main things I had to report.
Thanks, Jonathan. Alan, 1 minute.
I'm going to be attending the Colorado Communities for Climate Action retreat on Thursday, and I'll report back with anything interesting there. And I'm looking forward to a conversation with the county and the intergovernmental agreement. And I think part of that conversation should include the Cross Gold Mine as a major industrial site nearby.
Thank you, Alan. Eric?
Due to the quirks in the schedule, ProSAP has not met since my last report, so I have nothing to report on that front. I was unable to attend the Boulder County Consortium of Cities meeting, unfortunately, but I will be there next time. I did want just to thank, on the record, Atashna Medicine Shield Werner for all the work that she's done for ProSAP. She's going to leave the board, and I believe we're now going to have an opening there. That's correct, right, Miranda? That we have an opening.
It was posted yesterday. Yep.
Yeah, and hoping we get some great applicants. And yeah, thank you so much, Atashna, for everything that you've done for the community. It's been amazing to work with you.
You're here. Tanya?
No, I don't have anything to report.
Okay. Lindsay?
Finally have something to report. I attended the Mountain Coalition for Youth meeting on October 6th. As I'm getting involved with the Youth Opportunity Board and looking to get as many people involved as possible in working with Ben and our Mountain Coalition for Youth. So if you have any interest in working with the youth of our town and getting them more involved, not just in civics, but in kind of positive activities around town, please get in touch with me or with Ben. And yeah, look forward to seeing more engagement from the young ones in town.
All right. Julian?
Planning Commission wimped out. No meeting.
Don't sound so disappointed next time. All right. Does anyone have any other questions or other business? It looks like we might be out of here by 10 tonight. Anything you want to bring up?
I move to adjourn.
I second that movement.
We have a motion and an emphatic second. Macy, please call the motion to adjourn.
Mayor Larson,
Yes.
Trustee Taylor,
Yes.
Trustee Apt,
Yes.
Trustee Danforth,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baumhover,
Yes.
Trustee Corvallin,
Yes.
Trustee Coombs Ismail.
Yes.
At 9:58 p.m., we are adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
Good job, team.
Good job. Everyone have a great evening.
Good night.
Thank
Good
you all.
night.